Structure is a collection of variables of different data types. As compared to array, which are collection of similar data types, structure is collection of variables of different data types. So inside of a structure, you can have collection of variables of data type int, float, character, and so on. Now let us check how we can define a structure. So struct is a standard keyword in C which is used to define your structure. So after struct, you can write your structure name, and then inside of curly braces you can have collection of your variables which can have any data type. Notice a semicolon at the end of this structure definition, which is compulsory to have. Now let us check how we can declare a structure variable. To declare a structure variable, we again use keyword struct and then structure name, and after that you write your variable name. So variable name is a variable of type structure name. There is one more method using which you can declare your structure variable, that is you can immediately write your variable name after structure definition. So that is between curly brace and the semicolon. Now let us check how we can access data members of a structure. So this is your variable of type structure, and we use a dot operator, and after that we write member name. So if I have a structure student and inside it there is a variable as roll, then if we declare a variable of type student which is the structure, then we can access roll using this syntax, that is std1.roll. Now let us check how we can initialize the structure variable. So there are two ways to do it. Immediately after your structure definition, you can specify your variable name, and using equal to operator you can initialize value of that structure variable. So inside of structure student, I have a character array, then an integer and a float variable. So I'm initializing it with a string, an integer, and then finally a float variable. So this corresponding value will go inside of std1.name equal to Prashant, then std.roll equal to 10, and then finally std1.marks equal to 77.99. There is one more method using which you can initialize your variable. So when you have your structure defined, you can simply write struct, structure name, and your variable name for that structure, and then you can specify values for your structure. Now let us check a simple program on structures. In this program, we are going to define a structure employee having fields as name, ID, and phone number. We are going to accept values for each of this data member, and we are going to reprint it. So here is how we are going to define this structure. I'm writing struct as a keyword, then my structure name employee, and inside of curly braces I'm writing char name as character array, then emp id as an integer and phone number as a long, and then inside of our main function I'm declaring a structure variable e of type employee, and I'm asking user to enter name for this employee, and I'm going to store it in a.name. Similarly, I'm going to ask user to enter employee id, which is going to store in a.emp id, and finally I'm asking user to enter phone number, and it will be stored at the address location of e.phone_number. And once we have received all the inputs, we can simply print all the values on output screen which user has entered. So for that I'm using these three printf statements. So in the first statement I am printing e.name as %. In the next line e.emp id, we are going to print it as an integer, and then finally e.phone_number as long variable. This is the first time that we have used long as a data type. It is nothing but an integer which can store higher numbers. We are going to learn about more data types in coming lectures. In this lecture, we are going to learn about array of a structure. Assuming this to be my structure definition, so structure_name is a structure that I have defined over here. So for declaring an array of this structure, we will just write struct structure name, your variable name, and inside of square bracket we'll write size. So here we are declaring array of size 10 of structure variable structure_name. There is one more method using which you can declare array of structure, that is simply by writing your variable name and size over here. Now let us take one example to understand this concept better. We are going to write one program in which we'll define a structure name student with the fields roll number, name, and marks of three subjects M1, M2, and M3, and then we'll declare an array of this structure, and then we'll accept data for all the 5 students, and we will reprint the data. So this is the definition for structure student. This is my character array, then integer variable roll_number, and these are 3 subjects M1, M2, and M3. Then inside of main variable I am declaring array of structure student, naming it as S. I am defining size of this array as 5. So once my structures are declared, So after that I'm writing my for loop starting from I equal to 0, I less than 5. So this loop will execute for 5 times starting from 0 till 4. Inside this for loop I am printing enter data for student %d and I'm replacing it with I plus 1. So in the first iteration enter data for student 1 and in the next line I'm printing enter name and I'm going to store it into s of I, that is s0 dot name. So in the first iteration the value will be stored at s0 dot name. Similarly roll number will be stored at s0 dot roll underscore number. Similarly m1, m2, m3 will also be stored. So this for loop will accept values for 5 students because it will execute for s0 first, then s of 1, then s of 2 and so on. Once this is done, we just need to write one more for loop for I equal to 0, I less than 5, I plus plus, and inside of this for loop we just need to write printf statements to reprint values, structured data members, and for each of your structure variable which are part of your array. So here we will print s of I dot roll underscore number. Similarly finally we'll print printf %d comma %d comma %d, and then we'll supply values of s of I dot m1 comma s of I dot m2 and s of I dot m3. So this for loop you can write immediately after completion of this for loop. Obviously you can add more proper formatting inside of this printf statements. You can download the complete code from the download section. It has the complete program. In this lecture, we are going to learn about structure within structure. So what we are going to basically do is we are going to use a structure inside of structure. So if we assume structure 1 and structure 2 as your two structures, then inside of structure 2, I'm declaring a variable struct1 of type structure 1. So structure 2 is having some data member inside of it, out of which there is one data member of type struct1. So inside of struct1, there would be data members of struct1. So when we declare a variable struct2 of type structure2, we can access variables of struct2 as struct2 dot member name. Similarly, we can access data members of variable struct1 of structure1 as struct1 dot member name. So similarly for struct2, which is variable of type structure2, which is variable of type structure2, after that we can write dot struct1, which is declared over here, and we can use another dot operator to access data members of struct1. So this is one example of structure within structure. So we are using struct1 inside of struct2. Let us take one example to understand this concept better. In this program, we'll declare structure name as student, and inside of this structure variable, we will have another structure as dob and dog, that is date of birth and date of joining, which is in date format. So we will require month, date and yy as 3 variables to specify a date. So I'm using a structure as struct date. Inside it I have these 3 integer variables mm, dd and yy. Then I'm using one more structure as employee. Inside of that I have a character array, that is a string for storing name, then integer variable employee id, and after that I have a structure declared inside of this structure that is of type date, and my variable names are dob and dog. So what is happening over here, we have this structure as employee, and inside of that I have name as character array, then employee id as integer, and inside of that we have structure variables dob and doj of type date, which internally have 3 data members of type integer mm, dd, yy, and similarly here also mm, dd, yy. To access this variable, suppose we have e as structure variable name for employee, then we can access this variable as e dot dob dot mm, then e dot dob dot dd, similarly e dot dob dot yy. Same process for doj. So let us see what I have written in main. First of all, I have created a structure variable e of type employee. Then I am asking user to enter name, which is I am going to store in e dot name. After that I am asking user to enter employee id, which will be stored into e dot emp underscore id, and then I am asking user to enter date of joining, and I am also suggesting him the format. Notice that inside of scanf statement I have %d dash %d dash %d. So all the values for these 3 integers which will be inputted by user will be stored at these locations. e.doj.dd, e.doj.mm and e.doj.yy. So user has to explicitly type dash between these two variables. So %d dash %d dash %d. So if he wants to enter date as 26th of May 1983, then he will enter 26-05-1983. So 2605 and 1983 will be stored in these respective values. Use of dash is required in this case because if user just enters 2605 1983, then compiler won't know where which variable is ending. Similarly, after that I am asking user to enter date of birth. The same format is here, but instead of DOJ I am using DOB as storage, and once all the values are entered by user, we are just simply going to print all the variables here. So in the first line I am printing e.name as string, then e.empid as %d, then doj %d dash %d dash %d, and I'm going to supply value of dog over here. Similarly, on the next line value of dob over here.